Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started, if that's all right with everyone, just to keep to a nice tight schedule. Welcome back, everyone, to the weekly DBMI seminar series. This week, we are incredibly excited to have with us Dr. Riccardo Bellazzi. Dr. Bellazzi is full professor of bioengineering and biomedical informatics at the University of Pavia. He is the director of the Department of Electrical, Computer, and Biomedical Engineering of the University of Pavia. Moreover, he leads the Laboratory of Biomedical Informatics at the Hospital Salvatore Maugeri in Pavia. The scientific interests of Professor Bellazzi are highly interdisciplinary and are aimed at applications of informatics to medicine and life sciences, comprising artificial intelligence, biomedical data mining, telemedicine, temporal data analysis, decision support, clinical research informatics. He has a long-standing experience in ICT applications for diabetes management. Professor Bellazzi has a wide and internationally recognized research activity. In 2000, he founded the Working Group on Intelligent Data Analysis and Data Mining of the International Association of Medical Informatics, or IMIA. In 2009, he became a fellow of the American College of Medical Informatics for his international achievements. He is a founding fellow of the International Academy of Health Sciences Informatics, or the IAHSI, and he was vice president for MedInfo of IMIA in the period 2011 to 2014. He is and was involved in several EU-funded projects related to IT in medicine and bioinformatics. He is a member of the editorial board of the journals Methods of Information in Medicine, Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association, International Journal of Biomedical Informatics, Journal of Diabetes Science and Technology, and former associate editor of the Journal of Biomedical Informatics. Professor Bellazzi is author of more than 230 publications on international peer-reviewed journals and of more than 250 publications in proceedings of international conferences. Finally, he is co-founder of the academic spinoffs Biomeris, which implement software to support clinical research, and nGenome, which is specialized in the analysis of next-generation sequencing data with AI approaches. And without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Professor Bellazzi. We are very excited to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind invitation. It's a privilege to be here to give this seminar to you. And I also say hello to some of my colleagues and friends that I know since many years, like Chungwa and George Hripchak, who is a good friend also, Pavia, he knows the city too. Anyway, so let me start with my talk. I just share the screen. And okay, let's go. Okay, so that's the new logo of the University of Pavia that we had the recommendation to use it. So you can appreciate the color, that is the historical color of the university and the new logo. And by the way, so today I will just talk a little bit about this notion of trustworthy AI, which is one of the topics that we are working on also in my department, because there is a need that comes from a number of activities that we are carrying on in the EU context, which has some regulations and pushes towards the implementation of artificial intelligence in if possible, in a context that would be, we hope, trustworthy. So just to, I know that some of you know where Pavia is, but many don't. And so I just want to show you where we are. That is, we are very close to Milan. And I also want to point out that we are different from Padua or Padua University. So there is some confusion sometimes because the two universities are very old. But Padua is close to Venice, and on the contrary, Pavia is close to Milan. By the way, they are both very old and ancient universities in our country. That's the north part of Italy. And Pavia is a university, has a university since the year 1361. So you can see some pictures if you never been to Pavia. It's an invitation from my side to visit our university, because we have a very nice city, a small city, and historical buildings, and to be visited. By the way, a reason why I'm here, of course, is not because I work in history, but rather because the city over the centuries has developed a very strong faculty of medicine, which this is the city center where you can see Università degli Studi di Pavia is where the old buildings are located. But there is now this new area that is here, where we have several research hospitals, in particular 3 research hospitals that are co-located with technological faculties. And actually in 1 square mile, we have the engineering school where I work, and I lead this department of electrical, computer, and biomedical engineering. And really, walking distance, we have these hospitals. That's the Maugeri hospital where I have my lab, which is mostly related to long-term management of chronic patients' disease, of chronic patients, rehabilitation. Here we have the Mondino Hospital that is related to neurological diseases and neurosciences. And just on the other side of this ring of the city, we have the San Matteo Hospital, which is a general hospital with many specialties. And so it's a really nice environment to try to put together, conjugate, I would say, technologies in general and medicine. So that's probably the reason why I've been invited here, because I work in this topic since many years. And I also had the privilege to work with a lot of colleagues in a number of clinical applications. Even if my talk of today will be a little bit more on the aspects related to the trustworthy application of AI, and I will go through some of our recent work on the concept of reliability. By the way, the reason why I'm working, and I will talk a little about AI, is because when I was a PhD student, I was actually a PhD student in one of the 2 AI winters known in the history. And I actually worked at that time Bayesian networks. So I had this interest to try to conjugate quantitative approaches and AI at that time. And at that time, I also, felt like a single one in the middle of nowhere, trying to, let's say, put together some new ideas. And I had the opportunity to work in reality in a very nice lab. But, AI was sort of not so fashioned at that time. Now, the situation is the opposite. I'm getting older, and I'm sort of old researcher, still in AI medicine, but we are in the front of a real AI wave, in a way. AI wave that is trained, that is, let's say, leverages on machine learning and still quantitative approaches to the analysis of reality, I would say, and so I was here basically when everything was stopped, and that's basically saying that we are in front of a real AI wave at the moment, and we need to do our best to learn from the past, let's say, and avoid problems and issues. So for this reason, I think that we all know that AI has become so interesting because we have a lot of data that we can analyze, and there are a number of new strategies that work very well on a number of applications, and in particular guided mostly by image processing and text analysis, let's say. So it's not a surprise for you for sure that looking at the number of papers that are available on PubMed, we have this speedy increase in the number of publications and a number of subjects that are reported in the literature. But the field has become, I mean, so mature in a way that these kind of papers are now translated into products. And again, looking at the products, we can take a look at the FDA list of AI-enabled medical device. And it's quite interesting to see, if we take a look at the last update that happened in October, that the situation, if we compare it with the papers published, is has a distribution that is rather different, because it's in reality is the radiology, the area that has the largest number of devices that have been approved. So saying that probably that's the most mature area, which is basically the use of machine learning and deep learning for image processing, at least as the medical domain is concerned. We know very well that also processing of text works very well, because all the world is using now ChatGPT, and also in your group you have a long history of application of natural language processing technologies. But looking at the number of products, still we can see that the situation is this one, and that's quite interesting. So the increase also in the number of AI-enabled medical devices has pushed not only FDA, but also Europe towards the definition and the proposals of regulations in order to properly trying to use these new results coming from research, and trying to deal with the wave that I was previously showing to you in the best possible way. There's discussion about the new proposal for the AI regulation in Europe, also because this proposal, as many of the proposals of the European Union, is in reality trying to guarantee the citizens, and there's more an eye on the citizens guarantee than on the market in a way. So the idea is that this regulation is going to be for sure strict regulation in order to make an AI software as a medical device system available to the people. And one of the important aspect of transforming a software idea or even a software system into a product is that this kind of systems, anyway, even the machine learning systems that we are all working on at the moment, are in general components or more complex artificial intelligence systems. And for sure, in the regulation, we have to take into account that it's the final product that needs to be properly designed and properly put into the market. And in our case, these kind of systems that we do want to use and we do want to certify through regulatory bodies are mostly systems that are based on information. And as Enrico Cogliera has taught to us in his famous book, what's very interesting is that this kind of an entire system that we are designing is in reality arbitrary and purposive, and it is designed for a specific purpose. And this is one of the things that we have to consider also when we work with AI tools and systems, that the final purpose of the system that we are delivering is one of the elements, of the key elements that drives the overall process of certification, and in general that drives also the way in which the entire software should be designed and deployed. Enrico Coiera has published not a new paper, but because it dates now, is relatively only relatively new, about this kind of FDA-approved medical devices and what's inside, basically, these FDA-approved medical devices. And actually, in this very nice review, what he did was to try to make a parallel description of what's inside the machine learning medical device, and what are the stages of human information processing. Also, this was helpful to try to dissect the content of these FDA-approved medical devices in order to be able to extract again what is the purpose of the software as a medical device and how it was designed, basically. And that's why I think that this review is very interesting and very informative also from the methodological point of view. In this case, his analysis showed that most devices are designed to information analysis, decision selection, and less commonly in the part of information acquisition, and very few of them were related to action implementation, which is quite interesting if we consider all the stages in which artificial intelligence can be useful and used. Also, the clinical tasks, going again in the area of the purposiveness of the system, show that at the end, at this stage, artificial intelligence is used mostly for diagnostic tasks. And the other very interesting task is related to the triage tasks. This is not a full surprise, because if we think about how machine learning is performs and what are many of the algorithms that are used and published in the medical literature, we know that there are a lot of papers dealing with classification and regression tasks, which are, from the reasoning point of view, very simple tasks that maps straightforwardly, in a way, in diagnostics or triage tasks, while selecting medical procedures, planning, treatment requires systems that are much more complex and are based on a knowledge representation, knowledge description that needs a more profound design, and probably more complex to be also certified. And looking at the data, of course, as I already mentioned, the large majority of these medical devices are based on image data and some on signals, which looks, I mean, not surprising from looking at the data that I already showed. So finally, just to finish this introduction to where I am going in my talk, if we look at the level of autonomy, that's one of the, of course, critical aspects in applying AI systems. We have, Enrico and his colleagues have, and Farah Maghrabi, well, basically they dissected the different level of autonomy, subdividing it in assistive, providing autonomous information, or giving autonomous decision. And the majority of these of the devices were, of course, related to the first two tasks, while, of course, autonomous decision is a much difficult aspect to be achieved and limited to certain type of decisions. So moving from this analysis, that was it's an analysis based on the devices approved by FDA, to the European context. As I mentioned to you, there's a strong interest from the EU in order to try to define rules and guidelines for the, I would say, the use of artificial intelligence and dissemination of AI and application of AI in, at the end of the day, in software as medical devices. And it's clear also from the analysis that was presented so far, in the paper, that one of the most important aspects at the end of the story is to be able to design systems that are trustworthy. Trustworthy means, they, of course, they deserve trust, and so we can trust in them, even if they are complex system, designed on the basis of, or let's say, for achieving goals that are typical of AI tools, let's say, and are actually in a document that is of the 2019, so it's not new. Also, this document, 7 requirements for the implementation of AI trustworthy solution has been defined. So trustworthiness in reality is a property that doesn't belong only to the technical aspect, but on the contrary, is a property that is a typical property of a socio-technical system. And as also reported is in this nice conference paper, socio-technical system, multiple stakeholders, so engineers, business owners, and customers interact with technologies, and that's the idea. And of course, in order to be able to achieve this goal of building a trustworthy system, we need to take into account all the different dimensions. All the different dimensions that are reported in this list of 7 requirements that are reported here, if we want to follow the guidelines coming from the EU. And actually, so as a technician, and together with the other people working in technology, we can ask ourselves what can be our contribution to the design and implementation of this trustworthy system. And within this list of these 7 requirements, we thought that for sure we can work and we can provide solutions in at least 2 of the different aspects. Or I would say that we can, as the technologists, we can probably provide solutions to, or we can provide help to many of these. But in the rest of my talk, I will mostly concentrate on these 2 aspects that are transparency and, in particular, technical robustness and safety. So recently, together with a number of colleagues of mine, and including, as you can see, the list of people, including Carlo Combi and John Holmes from UPenn, and Carlo Combi from University of Verona, we have worked in this area of transparency that is mapped into the concept of explainability. And explainability in this paper that we have published together has been sort of redefined, resorting to this Venn diagram that tries to define explainability as the intersection of a number of different properties of an AI-based system that at the end of the day is aimed to provide transparency. And the properties that are reported are usefulness, interpretability, understandability, and usability, and that are defined in the paper in order to convince the reader, let's say, that explainability itself is a concept, is a sort of complex concept that needs to have all the different aspects together in order to be achieved. But one of the aspects that I personally reported in this paper is also that it's true that transparency is important, but it's also true that explanations are not always required in order to build a trustworthy system or for an AI model to be really useful. And what is instead of a necessary condition, in our opinion, is a condition that provides elements in such a way that when we, at the end of the day, are using our AI system in the real world, have enough tools to be able to use these systems every day, and enough instruments to trust in the output that the systems are providing. And one of the key elements to achieve this goal is to have a system that is technically robust and safe. And in order to speculate around these, to reason on robustness and safety, looking again at the EU ethics guideline, in the definition of robustness and safety, we can see that there are terms that looks quite interesting, like accuracy, reliability, and reproducibility. And we are now working on trying to translate these requirements into something that can be implemented into our AI system in order to be sure that we can increase the trustworthiness, let's say, at the end of the day, of the entire system that we are developing. And looking at the definition, of course, accuracy seems to be the first goal to be achieved by all papers that are published. Everyone is basically reporting the notion of let's say, statistical evaluation of an AI system being an accurate system. So everyone computes, if we have a classification system, the accuracy of the classification system. And but of course, we all know that accuracy is not enough. And so here, for example, we know, everybody knows that everybody working in this area, that we need to take a look at different measures in order to be able to extract information that is useful. And everybody knows from machine learning courses that there are many measures that are able to provide information about the accuracy of the system. But is all the other metrics enough if we really want to use our system in the context of online evaluation, and if we want to provide let's say, additional measures on how trustworthy are the prediction? And we know that when the systems are used, there might be shifts in the population, or when we learn from using a machine learning tools from the data, we may have data set shifts or underrepresentation in the training. So we have shifts in time or space in the use of the system when we deploy the system itself. So accuracy and statistical accuracy computed on on the data that has been used to train the system is not enough. And so the idea is to be able to provide additional information in order to say if we can trust the prediction of a single unlabeled patient in a similar way in which we do with the concept of explainability when we apply the algorithm for local explainability on the single case. And actually, for this reason, we think that of the definition of the European Union, a key property of our system is reliability. And reliability means, well, we have several definitions. That means that we need to have a system that performs its intended function for the required time duration in the specific environment without a failure. And how we can translate reliability into the concept, into the definition of an AI medical device that performs, for example, classification or prediction. Well, point-wise reliability can be easily translated into the idea of, trusting that the classification for a single instance is correct. And we have different measures in order to be able to then compute the reliability. So the idea can be to either try to rely on classifier characteristics, or more simply, if we have a probabilistic classifier, to use the concept of uncertainty. Uncertainty means that if we have a good classifier, the classifier provides a probability. And if the probability is close to 1, then we can say that our classification is reliable. Otherwise, if it's close to 0.5, we can say that the classification is unreliable. The real problem is that these estimates that our classification system is providing is, again, an estimator that is dependent on the data that has been used to train the model. And for this reason, when there are, for example, dataset shifts, as the case that I was previously describing before, our trust in model uncertainty can immediately decrease, because it decreases the trust that we have in the numbers that are provided here. So do we have additional solution? Well, the idea is to try to deal with the problem, deriving strategies for estimating reliability, not resorting directly on the uncertainty on the model, but rather designing algorithms that can be independent from the machine learning model used and with low computational demand, and that we have proposed to be defined on the basis of 2 principles. First of all, the density principle that asks whether the sample that we have to classify is close to the training set, comes from the very same population, or can be considered to be well represented by the population that has been used to train the data. The second aspect of reliability is what we have called the local fit principle, that basically asks whether the model performs well on samples that are close to the sample to be classified. And which means that in our training set, we want to see if locally our classification model worked well on that on cases that are similar to this case that we have to classify. So we are now working on a number of methods in order to assess reliability, and using these two ideas. So first, that we need to have an algorithm, that derives if the density principle works. So if our sample is close to the training set 1. And second, try to assess if the local fit works at the same time. Currently, we have implemented a very simple method to do it, even if we are working on other strategies that I'm not going to comment at the moment. But just to give you an idea, this is the density principle implementation that we have in a software that we recently published, that basically had this concept of trying to identify what are the borders, let's say, of the examples of the training set. And these are, as you can see here, we can identify inner borders or outer borders in case we have two different distributions of the data. And then when we have new samples that we want to classify, our idea is try to understand if the sample to be classified can be reliably considered to be part of this training set that is being extracted, or rather is outside the borders of all data that we have collected. I don't want to go too much into the details of these algorithms, but it's just one of the different algorithms that we can implement in order to check if our new sample to be classified is close in a way as part of the distribution that generated the training data. And of course, implementing the other principle, that is the local fit implementation, it can be even easier, because the idea is that when we have a new sample to be classified by the model, we can select the k-nearest neighbor to that sample, compute the accuracy, and then try to understand if the local accuracy of our classifier in this known training example is good enough, is compared with the threshold, for example. The combination of the two provides the assessment of reliability. So, and then once we have the data, once we have this algorithm, what we can do? Well, what we can do is to, for example, provide to our AI-based medical device a strategy to suggest that the model can abstain, or the user of the AI tool can abstain to use the model when the sample is considered, the prediction is considered not reliable. We have published on JBI the results of this work. We have done some examples based on simulated data and on data coming, for example, in this case from Mimic3 data set, where we basically predict in-hospital death from a clinical data set, where we wanted to test if our algorithm was able to derive estimate of the local fit principle and of the density distribution principle, learning, and we did it because we learn on purpose our classifier only on male data, And then we test it on male and female's data. And what you can see here is that when only the reliable samples are used, then the predictions become much higher. In that case, we're sort of perfect. While in the unreliable set, the prediction of the algorithm was bad, and also was very bad without the use of this assessment of reliability. Which means that, of course, but we knew that because the sample, our classifier was strongly biased by the choice of the data set. But in this case, we wanted to show that we can recognize it and use the algorithm only for the cases for which it's reliable to do it. This is a type of learning with rejection, basically. Then let me move actually to the final part of the talk. That was it's about the final aspect of this definition of trustworthiness. That is, if you remember, trustworthiness had one of the points related to robustness and safety. And we have said that inside this definition, we wanted to go along three properties, that is accuracy, reliability, and reproducibility. And in this aspect, I only want to point out that what is typically done is to check what is called the training reproducibility, or the ability to replicate the prior results using basically the same means as using the original work. But what's very important instead is what is so-called the inferential reproducibility, which is actually to use it, the system in the real context and to do the inference. When we reproduce the procedure so that the results are qualitatively similar to those of the original procedure itself. So in a way, they use in the real case, and which of course can show that the way in which we perform testing is probably not the best way that we are doing, that we have the best instrument if we want to use the system in the real context. And I think that I'm almost at the 45, so I'm gonna skip a number of other results that we have defined that I wanted to show. Just want to show you basically the pipeline that we are trying to propose in our projects as in additional instruments for trying to guarantee more robustness and safety of what we are doing. So let me skip these slides that were mostly related to a use of online learning system to go to the end of my presentation. The first thing that I want to say, being giving a seminar where OMOP has been defined, of course, a crucial aspect related to trustworthiness is related to all the aspect related to the management of the data themselves, because without good system for data curation, governance, and stewardship, there are no AI system based on data, and which is often the stone guessed in many papers that are published on the use of electronic medical record. And I often cite George Hripchak slides where he showed that the knowledge of the data and of the process generated the data is key and is part of this trustworthiness that I was previously mentioned. So what are the contexts in which we are trying to use these strategies? We have a number of EU projects that have been funded. One was and is going to finish now, and it's about COVID-19, also in Europe, and it's called Periscope. And in this case, basically, the idea was to try to learn from the pandemics in order to develop guidance for reactions for policymakers for potential future pandemics. Then we have another project where we are actually applying machine learning and trying to use it in a real day-by-day context that is related with this project called Brain Teaser that deals with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and multiple sclerosis. Here we are building the infrastructure, but the idea is to collect data from home and combine them with environmental data in order to provide support for the management of the day-by-day activities of this particular type of patients, including planning of their activities on air while walking or going around. And the final project that I want to mention to you is a project called Capable that is still in the design phase and is still getting the data. In this case, this is a system for designing coaching for cancer patients that are based on the combination of data and knowledge available on guidelines for the management of patients of the complications of the therapy, of particular of chemotherapy at home. So let me go to the end, just to summarize a little bit the content of my talk. Well, we all agree that it's important to design new systems, new devices, new tools that are trustworthy, but trust it can be achieved only if we combine the technical aspects and the human aspect in the design of AI-based systems. Our AI tools, from the technical point of view, are components, and in particular, machine learning tools are components of information systems that always have purpose, that are key in order to properly design our system, including deciding what type of outputs we want to provide to users. The definition of machine learning methods and technologies being data-driven has implications for the achievements of this trustworthy goal, and the trustworthiness passes through the safety and reliability on all components. And in the talk, I basically, what I did was to focus on a specific aspect of this concept, that is the definition of reliability of a classification system, providing an idea and the current solution that we are working on in order to achieve, let's say, to provide in additional measures when we perform the classification on the single case. And just as a conclusion, of course, I am not just giving you any recipe, but rather just elements that we put in this game that we are all playing together, belonging to our community of medical informaticians and bioengineers, which is the right community in order to properly design and implementing this AI solution. And we all know that the trust that we want to achieve doesn't come from free, and it's an important part of the game is to work on medical informatics education and the AI education, and that's exactly what we are doing with our groups. So that's the group that I'm working on. Most of the work I presented is a work of Giovanna Nicora, who's working with me on this and other researchers on this topic. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that absolutely wonderful talk, Professor Bellazzi. We're going to open up now for questions. If you have any questions, folks, please use the Zoom functionality so I can see you. All right, Shreyas, go for it.
Hi there. Thanks for this very interesting talk. So you talked a little bit about how models can fail for a lot of reasons due to dataset shifts, population shifting. And we know that this can also happen even within hospitals over time. Models can degrade due to these kinds of shifts. And I think people have tried to do these multi-site validation studies across many different populations. And even those maybe, they might spot problems or they might have good results. But I think at the end of the day, it's hard to kind of guarantee that these models will perform well in a new hospital. So I guess my question is, from the regulatory perspective, should there even be a notion of kind of broadly approving such a device, or should there be kind of more hospital-specific, population-specific approvals? So just wanted to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, well, one of the reason why we thought about this, adding these measure of reliability was exactly in the along the line that you were mentioning. That is basically have add or require to the device to have a strategies to perform self-diagnostics and to try to understand, if, okay, I'm on track, I'm not on track, and something is happening here, so that the system is not really useful or usable. One of the problem, of course, is of what I showed, for example, is that one is supposed to have the training data available in a way, which of course is not realistic. So it's realistic to write a paper, but not in the realistic case. So an interesting topic that we are working on is to try to use a model basically to describe the training set and to do the role of the training set in such a way that this makes this portable. And the model means an autoencoder or any strategy that basically is able to replicate the statistical properties of your population and try to understand. So that's the area where we are working on. But your question is very nice, because we had this experience with a previous project on diabetes, where we basically designed a hospital-centric model that worked okay for that specific group of patients that were treated by that hospital. In that case was the Maugeri hospital, which is a hospital that treats diabetic patients that are in reality complicated with a lot of comorbidities. They arrive at this hospital because they already have heart disease or and so it's a super specific group of people, so that you can, but in that case, of course, there is anyway a problem of certification or of the system that you are using, because it may work only for that particular hospital, let's say. Thank you for the question. We have Pavia.
Hi, Dr. Bellazzi. Thank you so much for a great talk. I was really interested in this work, partially in the context of some research that I'm doing. So my work focuses on human-computer interaction, providing micro-coaching and decision support in the context of chronic disease management for diabetes. And I'm also working on some projects around risk prediction for postpartum depression. A lot of my work is focused on visualization of this information. So I was really interested at the point of care. So I was really interested in some of the questions around facilitating trust, facilitating reliability, but also facilitating appropriate trust and reliability to practitioners at the point of care. It looks like a lot of your the projects that you described, there are different kinds of users. There are both patients and clinicians that may have different understanding, neither of whom are involved in model development. And I think sometimes in the community, we often talk about reliability computationally, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts from your experience also of what tenets of that computational assessment of reliability carry forward for users' understanding of how to interpret those results in practice, especially with the building skepticism around how to trust these models in the real world settings, and what are user needs that are maybe still unmet by how we present these models to people in practice.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, well, first of all, as I mentioned in the talk, I see these AI systems as part, let's say, as a complex piece of technology that needs to take into account this, let's say, all the aspects. And so a lot of attention now is mostly related on maybe on machine learning itself, but in reality, it's the entire set of components that are critical, as you were mentioning. So including the way in which the information is provided to the users, which is very related to the purpose of the system and why the system is being designed in a certain way. So the experience that we have done with diabetes is an experience that had this idea of using the prediction models as a way to mostly to focus attention on some specific potential risk for further complication to the patient. So it was not really important in that case to have a system that was able to forecast what's going to happen to that patient in 5 days, but rather during the discussion with the patient to be able to pop up, the warning sign and allowing during the face-to-face visit to draw the attention on specific subtopic that is relatively complex because it's multivariate. It's not something that appears, pops up immediately, but rather being a combination of different sources of information, it may provide a guide for having a better face-to-face interaction with the patient. So that's, for example, a use that is not very often reported in the literature in a way, but it's some of the topic that you are apparently working on that I feel are really, are crucial for a proper use of this kind of technologies.
Wonderful, thank you. We are at the hour. I had a question for you if you have a couple extra minutes, but of course, if you need to leave, that is completely understandable.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. Are you willing to stay on for a couple minutes?
Sure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So for context, I studied political science in my undergraduate studies and am very interested in the risk regulatory process for a variety of different products and things like that. And one of the topics we discussed a bit was this concept of planned adaptation. And so the idea that it goes along with the uncertainty of temporality of data, essentially, is that, in any given instance, whatever you're trying to build or enact, whether it's a policy about, flood protections in the Netherlands, this is the case study that we used, what might work in the immediacy may not work in the future. And there is a need to build in mechanisms to consistently and within a structured manner evaluate the product and then adapt as you move forward. But it's this idea that it's codified, it's in a regulatory process. And so I'm curious, you know, Shreyas kind of already talked about this, how we can test at multiple sites at any given point in time for a given algorithm. But I'm curious, are there pipelines for this like temporal consideration of data shift, because that is a huge challenge as you discussed. So I'm just curious, is there an analogous concept in the machine learning world to planned adaptation?
Well, for sure. Together with Chunwa, we have reviewed PhD thesis working in this aspect of temporal shifts. Let's say that is one of the elements that are really key here. Also, George Ripchak from your group is an expert in understanding the effect of time and the change that may occur over time to the models. And actually, what is currently lacking, in my opinion, is this temporal view in the regulatory process, or maybe it's me who am not knowledgeable about it and somebody thought about it, but it's clear that when we have a machine learning algorithm that learns from data, then these data are, even if they are temporal data, but in general they are collected at one time when you perform when you collect the training set, your training sets. So it's related to a specific period of time, even if the data are temporal and not cross-sectional, but most of the data are cross-sectional. So this means that they are a picture at a certain time. And this means that you would require to periodically re-update or revise the algorithm with the change of the characteristic of the population, general temporal shifts. And it's again a requirement that needs to be included in the regulatory process. There are some examples of how the regulation requires devices to be updated, but in this case it becomes fundamental to do it, to think about it.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the wonderful talk again today.
Thank you. Of course, if I would have been there in presence, the talk would have been much better, but I hope that it was fine anyway.
It was fantastic. And the next time you come back to New York, we'll be here.
Okay, great. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Dan. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.